Dad, I've had you on. This is your third time on the podcast. I've had you on twice. We did the best Orioles offseason moves. We did the worst Orioles offseason moves. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do the all-time Orioles draft. So we're going to go around and we're going to pick players. We're going to go back and forth. I'll let you have the first pick, but we're going to do the all-time player draft at each position, 3 starting pitchers, and at the end, we're going to construct an all-time Orioles batting lineup. So thank you so much for helping me out. I always enjoy it when you come on. Your wealth of knowledge of Orioles is always greatly appreciated.
Well, thanks, and it's great to be on, and just 1979 through say current time. That's kind of my era, but the golden age basically 79 through 83. That's kind of my favorite time in Orioles history. So you may see, not to give away my secret, but you may see a lot of Orioles from that era.
Right. And mine will probably skew like newer, guys from like the mid 2000s to now. So it'll be interesting to see. So here's kind of like some of the rules and guidelines. We're going to pick 1 player at each position, 3 starting pitchers and a reliever and a DH. You're going to construct your all-time Orioles lineup. And at the end, we're going to put them in a batting order in which people are going to vote on. The criteria is all yours, though. Like, I've given you a list of the top guys at each position based off Fangraphs WAR. Wins above replacement. It's a pretty good measure of how well a player's career was. Obviously, the higher the better. And based off Fangraphs WAR, and you decide which players you want. Like, you don't necessarily have to take the number 1 guy at each position based off Fangraphs WAR. You could have a favorite guy that didn't have a great career, but you just still like him. It's really up to you. So I'm interested to see what yours is going to look like. All right. So, Dad, you have the first overall pick. You are on the clock. Who is your first overall selection?
Well, that's easy. I'm going to go with the greatest Oriole of all time, and that's starting pitcher Jim Palmer.
Multiple Cy Young awards, 260-something wins. Why not Cal Ripken? Because most people, when they think of greatest all-time Orioles, they think of Cal.
Because, well, big reason for me is because every World Series the Orioles were in, Jim Palmer pitched. He also won his last win was in the World Series in 1983 against the Phillies. So you can't beat that track record. And so it was 66, 69, 70, 71, 79, and 83. All those World Series, Palmer was an integral part of the Orioles team. So, and as you say, Hall of Famer, 262 wins. For me, that was the choice.
All right. So that, of course, would leave me to pick for my first overall pick. I'm taking Cal Ripken Jr. He's going to be my shortstop. 2-time AL MVP. That final, 18-something All-Star appearances. That last one in Texas where A-Rod made him go back to short was amazing. 83 World Series was the only one they got, but postseasons back in the mid-90s and really kept them relevant when they really had nothing else going on. So Cal is going to be my guy at shortstop. I'm surprised you didn't pick him, but Cakes Palmer, as he was known, that's not a bad one.
Well, just remember my era, 79 to 83, it was all about pitching. So that was my thought.
All right, where are you going for your second pick?
I'm gonna go behind the plate, and I'm gonna pick up Rick Dempsey at catcher.
83 World Series MVP, right?
Right, and he handled a bunch of great pitchers, a bunch of 20-game winners, and it's a chicken and egg type proposition. Do you have great pitchers and some guys just catching them, or is the guy who's catching them making them or helping them to be great pitchers? So I'm gonna still stay with the pitching end of things, and I'm gonna go with my defensive-minded catcher Rick Dempsey. He could throw out some base runners, and I have to say he could hit some of the meanest line drives foul that you'd ever see. It was impressive. He'd hit 4 or 5 in a row, and it just rockets, down third base line, but just barely foul. So, but yeah, to me, it doesn't get any better at catcher than Rick Dempsey.
Yeah, that's a good one. He light in the batting department. He's like a 5 to 10-ish homer guy, I think. But yeah, you get a guy that handles your staff pretty well with your pick, so I like that. So I got a lot of options. I got the whole board ahead of me.
Sure.
I'm going to stick in the infield. I'm going to grab a top 10 third baseman of all time. I'm going to take Brooks Robinson, the human vacuum cleaner. I think like over a dozen gold gloves. He has a career WAR of 80.2, which I looked that up because I was curious where that ranked all time. He's sitting 8th all time in terms of career WAR for third baseman. So Brooks Robinson, flashy with the glove, was there forever. That's my second pick.
Yeah, I mean, and he had some great years with the bat too. I mean, he was not a slouch, as a hitter. He and Frank Robinson teamed up to have some really good years. The Robinson brothers, as they called them. So naturally, you can see where I'm going with this. I'm taking Frank Robinson for my next pick. Because when he arrived in 1966, that just turned everything around for the O's. And I remember reading the biography of Earl Weaver, and I remember there was a section in there where he lamented that they had traded Brooks Robinson just too soon, right after the '71 World Series, and he still had some really good years left. So, and when you're talking about the greatest Orioles of all time, Frank Robinson has got to be in there in right field.
Well, he was the last Triple Crown winner until Cabrera, 1966, right?
Okay, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Little fact knowledge dropping on you. Um,
nice.
all right. Well, there's a lot left. I want to be strategic here. I'm wondering if I should go into a shallow position because some of these positions are obvious. There's home runs like Cal, and you're talking about Brooks. I am going to. I think I'm going to zag. Yeah, I'm going to zag. I'm going to go starting pitching. I'm going to grab the second greatest Orioles starting pitcher of all time. I'm going to take Mike Mussina, Moose. 90s, like when he left for the Yankees in the 2000s, obviously that kind of tarnished his reputation. But in the steroid era, with those guys who were hitting 60, 70 home runs, I think Moose's ERA around the high threes, low fours, with about 20-ish wins every single year. I'll take that every day of the week.
Yeah, he was solid. And if you remember the 1997 ALCS against Cleveland, and the Orioles really should have won that. But Cleveland, was the underdog team. They came back and they beat them to go on to the World Series that year. But if you remember, I mean, it wasn't because Mussina didn't give his best. I remember he was matching zeros with, I can't remember who the Cleveland starter was, but it was quite a game, and those guys were just out there. I think he pitched 10 innings in that game. I could be wrong in '97, but the Orioles ended up losing that game in overtime, and then they lost the ALCS. And that they really should have gone to the World Series in '97. But Mussina was a big part of that, and he was just rock solid. And ironically, as a Yankee, his last year in the majors, he wins 20 games and he retires. So there you go.
He went out on top like Seinfeld.
Yeah, exactly. Great pitcher, and that's a rock solid pick.
What are you going for number 4?
I'm going to stay in pitching, and when you think about pitching, obviously Palmer was as close to perfection as it gets. I'm going to go with perfection, but I'm going to go in a direction that you might not be expecting, and I'm going in for relief pitcher. I'm going with Randy Myers. And Randy Myers really made the '96 and '97 Orioles playoff teams a factor because he came in and he was just a shutdown guy. They brought him in from Cincinnati. He was part of the Nasty Boys team over there. They bring him in. He has a perfect season in 1997. He does not blow a single save all season long, and that may sound like Zach Britton of a later era, but Randy Myers is where it all started. So for relief, I want that guy in the bullpen, on the back end when I'm trying to protect the lead and get the win.
I like it. That's where you're zagging when people think you're gonna zig. I like that. I'm surprised this guy's lasted this far. He has a statue out there in Monuments Park, or statue, whatever you call it, out in center field at Oriole Park. I'm gonna go first base Eddie Murray.
Oh,
Eddie
brutal.
Murray.
Okay. Yeah.
What was it? Don't throw him a changeup because he won't be able to hit it. Was it a changeup or a curveball you couldn't hit?
He could not hit a changeup, but you could count on it that he was going to hit 300 with 30 home runs every single year, and that was boy, I wish you'd held off on that one because that was going to be my next pick.
That the late '80s and the Orioles got bad. They obviously traded him. I don't think they really got much for him. He went and
No,
bounced around, went to L.A., went to Cleveland for a little bit. But when Eddie came back in '96, how excited were you?
that was exciting, and he hit his 500th home run with the Orioles that season, and he wasn't. He was sort of a shadow of himself at that point, but it was still great to see him back. And they made the playoffs that year, and so that was a great year. 88 wins, but still they were back in the playoffs again, and you had the sense that they were going to do something for a while. And they did the next year. I mean, they were first place all season long in '97. So a couple good years there. But yeah, you're right. It was Eddie Murray. It was great having him back on the team, even for just a little while.
Absolutely, a little nostalgia. I think he came up in like the late '70s, early '80s, and then to come back in '96. He's really old, but it's still awesome. So I just want to point out that okay, we've only taken one outfielder. I don't know if that says anything about the strength of the Orioles outfield throughout the years, but where are you thinking for your next pick?
Well, I mean, I was going to go since you went to first base with Murray. It just kind of brought to mind that I should go back to first base, but I'm going to take Palmeiro. And again, when you're talking about those late '90s Orioles teams, just such a sweet swing. Now I know the steroid thing has tainted his legacy, but I mean, the guy could just flat out hit. He could hit with Texas. He came over and he hit with the Orioles. He could hit for power. He could hit the ball wherever he wanted to serve it up. He was a tough out all the time, and he was a good guy. Again, it was just unfortunate that the steroid thing happened, but I feel like he didn't need that. He had what he needed to be successful, and whatever paranoia or whatever it is that made the players go to that, in the '90s, we'll never know. But for me, he was an all-star. He was a great player. He was a great hitter, and I think he was a big part of those really good Orioles teams of the late '90s.
We talked about him on the best Orioles offseason moves. I had him on there. That contract he signed, he earned every penny of it. I think it was '93 through '97, I want to say, or
Right.
something like that. Like
Yeah.
30-ish homers a year.
Sure.
And he liked the Orioles so much he came back at the very end. So
Right.
that's a great pick. Rafi, first base. I got to get something in the outfield. I don't have a single outfielder. This
You don't.
is
I've been keeping track.
this is bleak. I'm gonna go center field, and I'm gonna go my guy AJ Adam Jones. Just the model of consistency. When they traded for him from Seattle for they got George Sherrill, they got Chris Tillman, all for Eric Bedard. Eric Bedard's also the moodiest person of all time, apparently. But when they got Adam Jones, like the first couple years, '08, '09, he was hurt a little bit, but he just burst onto the scene with this home run power that I don't know if he knew he had. 25 home runs. I think it was like 7 or 8 consecutive years. All-star appearances, home run derby. He's Mr. Oriole for a while.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart when they didn't bring him back for the 2019 season. And now he's playing in Japan. But my guy, AJ, Adam Jones, center field.
Yeah, a super guy, high character individual, very consistent, as you say. He would swing at some crap. I mean, he
Yeah, he
would
would.
do that, because he was aggressive. He was an aggressive hitter. But, you knew that he was going to get you over 20 home runs. You knew he'd be up around 300 with a batting average, at least 280. And the defense, you just couldn't beat it in center field. I'm gonna go into center field, but I'm gonna go with a guy from a slightly earlier era, and I'm going with Al Bumbry, the B, Al Bumbry, and he was a big part of those late '70s, early '80s teams. And when you look at the stats, they're not overly impressive, but what the guy brought to the game was a lot of heart. He could steal bases. He could catch the ball. He had some really good years with the average. Not a lot of power, as you might expect from a speedster, but he, at the top of the lineup, he was the one that set the table for the big guys that came up next, whether it's, Murray or Singleton or Ripken, those guys. He was the table setter, and I think that he was a big reason why the Orioles teams of the late '70s, early '80s were so good. So I'm putting him in my lineup in center field.
I like that. A little speed, a little contact at the top there. Yeah, I mean that's a great pick. I'm going to stick in my generation, and this is my favorite Oriole of all time. I want to make sure I had to get him on there. I'm going second base. I'm going B-Rob, Brian Roberts.
Sure. Yeah, great pick.
He was a doubles machine, a stolen base machine. Those mid 2000s Orioles were all they had to, like, all the fans had to look forward to was, the up the middle infield of Tejada and Roberts and Melvin Moore over there. That's all they had. And B-Rob was awesome. Remember that one year he had 18 home runs out of nowhere?
Yeah,
And
sure.
then he got hurt when he dislocated his shoulder. That was a great year. I think that was 2005. But he's my favorite player of all time, so I had to get him on there. B-Rob. I just wish he would stop with the concussions, though. That really derailed him.
Yeah, I mean, his career ended too soon, and a big part of that was, of course, that game that you're referencing against the Yankees, where I don't remember the runner, I don't remember who it was,
Bubba
but he
Crosby.
was it okay, and so basically Roberts is stretching out for to catch the ball, and then Crosby runs past and kind of whatever he did there, he did, like you say, dislocated the shoulder, but that was heartbreaking to watch, and he really wasn't the same after that, unfortunately.
He was sliding into head first into second base. He hit himself over the head with a bat and gave himself a concussion.
Right.
Uh, and then his final year is with the Yankees in 14, which it's weird when a guy plays his entire career in one team, and at the very end he goes out to another, like, the hated rival. So that was a little weird, but he still does stuff with Masson, I think. So my guy B-Rob, second base. Who do you got next?
I'm going to go into the DH realm, and I'm picking up my man Lee May. And Lee May was pretty well done by the late '70s, but he was Frank Robinson's replacement. So when Frank leaves, they bring Lee May over, I think also from Cincinnati. Cincinnati had some sluggers back in the day. And so Lee May comes over, and he hits 20 home runs plus every single year. And I remember his last game as an Oriole, Weaver puts him in the lineup to lead off because he's at 19 home runs for the season. And it's his last game as an Oriole. It's the last game of the season. He bats him lead off so they'll have additional chances. And of course, he doesn't get the 20th home run. He broke the string of whatever it was, 8 or 9 seasons in a row with 20 home runs. Unfortunately, he didn't get it that year. But, Weaver tried. And so I remember fondly, Lee May and the power he brought to the lineup. And so I've slotted him in at DH.
That's a good one. He's Lee May, 4.7 career WAR with the Orioles. He's 6th all time. That's a good one. Yeah, the Reds back in the day had all the sluggers, it felt like.
They really did. Yeah, and they had more talent than they knew what to do with. Of course, they went to all the World Series and so forth. But yeah, Lee May's my guy at DH.
All right, I'm going to round out my infield. I'm going to stick in my generation. I'm going Joe Mauer with power. This is the guy that graced the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was a prospect. Way too tall to be a catcher, they said. Matt Wieters. People forget how to spell his last name. Is it I before E? Is it E before I? He was my guy. 15 to 25-ish home runs. The average is going to be about 250 every single year.
Yeah.
He's going to manage your pitching staff amazingly, and he's going to be Gold Glove behind the plate. So Matt Wieters, he didn't live up to the high expectations we put on him as a prospect, but a very solid career, and he's 3rd all time in Orioles catcher career WAR.
Yeah, and he's still playing, right? St. Louis.
He's a free agent right now.
Free agent, okay.
So he doesn't have a team, but yeah, he's been the backup to Yachty in St. Louis the last couple years.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think he's a great pick. And I looked at him. I looked at Chris Hoyles at catcher. You like guys that are good behind the plate, obviously. You also like guys that can hit the ball out. If I had another pick for catcher, it would have been Chris Hoyles because of his home run power, but that's neither here nor there. I'm gonna go to second base at this point. And I think I would like to go with Davey Johnson, the former Orioles and Nats manager, and of course, early '70s second baseman for the Orioles. And here was a guy that could just flat out play, but he wasn't a home run hitter until he left the Orioles. He decided to beef up. He gained weight, he gained muscle, he worked out. He went to the Atlanta Braves and hit 40 home runs. Just shocked the baseball world because this is a guy that was usually somewhere in the teens in terms of homers. Goes to the Braves, hits 40 home runs. But again, in terms of being a great Oriole, I like David Johnson. I'm proud to put him at second base.
That's a good one. Then he was the manager of the '86 Mets, right?
He was, yeah. He won the World Series with them.
Yeah, he was the
Best
Nationals
manager in
manager.
baseball.
Yeah, he was the
Right.
Nationals manager for a little bit too. So,
And he was Orioles manager in '96 and '97. You see how this all kind of ties in.
it's all connected. I like that. I'm looking around. I got left, right, and DH, and every pitcher is still on the board for. Oh, I have one starting pitcher, so I I think I'm gonna take the third all time pitcher. I'm gonna take Dave McNally.
Mm.
I don't know a lot about him because he pitched in the 1970s, but he's third in Orioles career WAR, and I'm sure he could probably provide a little bit more insight as to Dave McNally.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of those 4 game winners that they had in 1970. Consistent guy. He was just, he was part of this amazing pitching staff that they had, along with Mike Cuellar, Jim Palmer. Um, I can't remember
Pat
the others.
Dobson.
But Pat Dobson, thank you. So yeah, I mean, solid pick. You can't go wrong with that.
I had to get I'm going down the board. I want to take chalk picks. This is like the stock picks right here.
Sure.
All right, who are you thinking next? Where are you going?
I'm going to third base, and I'm going with my man Doug DeCinces. And you picked Brooks at third, and DeCinces was Brooks's replacement. And DeCinces was a great player, and his biggest problem was he was playing third base after Brooks. And so he was always kind of being compared, and he was always being overshadowed. But the guy had an amazing glove. He could hit the ball. He was just a great player. He had a great game in, I think it was the first game of the 1979 ALCS against California. Well, it's Anaheim Angels, but it was the California Angels back then. And he just, he hit the ball. I remember one of the plays that he made in the ninth inning. I think he was able to dive, grab the ball, touch third, throw to first for a double play that ended the game. So, he was able, when the Orioles finally, after 8 years, got back in the playoffs, he was the guy that solidified their first win, and then they were off and running and to, off to the World Series against Pittsburgh.
That's a good pick. I am going to go left field. Give me, I don't know. I could say Boog Powell's a left fielder, but I think that's kind of cheating. I wouldn't call him a left fielder. Actually, no, scratch that. We're not going to do in left field. Left field is traditionally a very weak position for the Orioles. I'm going to call an audible. I'm going right field, and I'm going my guy, Nick Markakis.
Well, yeah, that's a great pick, and he's still a great hitter all these years later. I remember when the Orioles let him go into free agency, that Adam Jones was very upset about that because they had a solid outfield, and of course he was a big part of that. But yeah, that's an awesome pick for right field.
20-ish homers, like 100 RBIs most years. He was one of those guys in the late 2000s, kind of early 2010s. That was the model of consistency, professional hitter, and he was a Gold Glove right fielder. So that is my guy. I'm sticking. My outfield's all young guys or newer guys. So where are you going next?
I'm gonna go to left field, and you were referencing the Orioles have some weaknesses there, and they've had some good players in left field. B.J. Surhoff, They moved Brady Anderson over there for a while. They had Don Buford there in the early 70s when they were going all speed. In 72 and 73, they were stealing bases all over the place. My guy for left field, though, would be, again, from my era, that late 70s, early 80s, would be John Lowenstein. And I don't know if he's even on your list. And if he's not, shame on you, because he was a great Oriole. He was a clutch hitter. He was passable on defense out there. He didn't hurt you. He may not have helped you a lot, but he didn't cost you any runs. He caught everything he could catch up to. Not great speed, but a good clubhouse guy. And he did have some really good years, and they had that platoon going on with Renicky and Lowenstein. Lowenstein was a left-handed hitter, Renicky the right-hand hitter. And there were some years that they would get 40 home runs from these guys in left field. So the platoon system worked. Lowenstein was part of that. I remember he stayed with the Orioles after his career was over, and he was an announcer for them in 1996. He was the color commentator on the MASN broadcast, and he was a homer on that, because he was he what like today we expect the color commentators to be somewhat objective. I mean, okay, that guy made a great play, but he was just rooting for the Orioles the whole time. So he was a better left fielder than he was a color commentator. But Lowenstein's my guy, my pick for left field.
Who was the lead guy? Was it John Miller?
No. I knew you were going to ask me that, and I can't remember. I'd have to look it up.
We'll come back to that. It's all right.
We'll circle back to that.
We'll circle back, yeah.
As the press secretary says, we'll circle back to that.
Yeah, that's what they say in the biz. I'm gonna take my relief pitcher, and if you haven't already noticed a trend here, I'm sticking in my era. I'm taking Zach Britton.
Of course.
Zach Britton, that devastating sinker. He comes up. He's initially a starting pitcher. He has one okay year. I think he goes 11-11. And then I think he had to redevelop himself as a relief pitcher. They stuck him in the bullpen because he just sucked, or maybe he got hurt. I know he did the weighted ball program. He added like 5 miles per hour to his fastball. As a starting pitcher, he's low 90s. He comes back as a hard-throwing relief pitcher from the left-hand side, nasty sinker, and he goes on to have several awesome seasons, like high saves. He didn't blow a save an entire year. He's an all-star. Like, Zach Britton was awesome. And then when they traded him to the Yankees, that broke my heart. But he helped. And then the 2016, they didn't use him out of the bullpen in that game against Toronto, the wild card game. They left him warming up, and they put Ubaldo in.
Yeah, and that went a long way to costing Buck his job eventually. Of course, that lousy season with 40-some wins didn't help any. But yeah, Britton's as good as it gets, and the fact that the Yankees have been using him as their setup guy tells you how good their bullpen is. Because he's every bit as good, saving as he is setting up. But again, he had that perfect season, and remembering Randy Myers, Zach Britton was, the next chapter in that book. So that's an incredible pick. I'm going to go to shortstop. I'm going to go ahead and finish my lineup, and I like Miguel Tejada. They brought him over as a free agent from Oakland. He may not have lived up to his contract, but he was a darn good player at shortstop, and I thought he was a great free agent signing for them. So I'm putting Tejada in at shortstop.
Tejada kept providing value. Well, like, they traded him to the Astros, and they got back Troy Patton and Luke Scott. Luke Scott goes on to be one of their great designated hitters. I think Luke Scott's, where is he at? He is right now the 4th best designated hitter of all time.
Wow.
And Troy Patton was the lefty out of the bullpen when they needed him. And then, remember when they found out Tejada's birth certificate was wrong because he was from the Dominican and he was 2 years older than he really was?
Yeah, and that makes a big difference when you're signing free agents, because if you're signing a guy that's 28, that's one thing. You're signing a guy that's 30. There's a big difference there when you're talking 5 or 6 years, which is what I think they gave him. So, good point. I'd forgotten about that.
And then he came back for one final farewell tour at the very end. So that was fun. All right. I'm going to take a left fielder, but I'm not going to be confident about it because there's not a lot. Like I said this earlier, there's not a lot of talent. Like, I think Brady Anderson is kind of cheating. I think he was a center fielder for most of his career, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So I wouldn't call him a left fielder. I don't know who Ken Williams is. I am going to go BJ Surhoff because he kind of bled into my era a little bit at the very end. Um, he most of his career is with Milwaukee, I think. Pretty good home run power. What else do you remember about BJ Surhoff? Was he one of those guys in the playoff teams in the late '90s?
He came in slightly after that. He was a professional hitter. He's like Jeff Conine. There's another guy I didn't see on the list, but I'd pick him and put him somewhere because he would just flat out hit all the time, and everything he hit was hard. But that was Surhoff. I mean, he just had that sweet swing. He could serve it up wherever he wanted it to go. He was a tough out. He was a great teammate. The average was always, around 280. Good defense, not great, but good defense. I mean, he's a guy you'd want to have on your team, and the Orioles were lucky to have him during his prime, for much of his prime.
Right. I just remember him. He came back to the Orioles in 2005, and that's the first year I started watching.
Okay.
I think he probably played a lot more DH at that point because I think he was almost 40. But BJ Surhoff, my all-time left fielder. All right, so you have two. We have two left. So you need two starting pitchers.
Yeah, and one of those is Scott McGregor. And Scott was the soft throwing left-handed pitcher, oft injured. He came over in that big trade that they made with the Yankees in 1976 when they picked up. It was him. They picked up Tippy Martinez. They picked up Rick Dempsey. That trade really set up the Orioles for that run that they made of really good teams from 77 through 83, 84. But Scott McGregor, as you remember, he won Game 5 of the 1983 World Series against the Phillies. He was just, he was an incredible pitcher, and he pitched with his brains rather than his arm most of the time. So he would be my second choice for starting pitcher.
I met him at Orioles Fan Fest a couple years ago, and I remember you because you're a big Scott McGregor fan, and you had told me you
Right.
watched him pitch. I think it was 1979, maybe the ALCS. It was a playoff game he pitched that you went to and he lost.
83 was the first game of the 83 playoffs against Chicago. He got outpitched 2-1 by Lamar Hoyt. My dad and I went up there, and we watched that game from the left field stands. But it was incredible to be there. The crowd was going wild, and you knew they weren't done. It was only 2-1. It was only one game. They just they hit a pitcher that was just a little better than McGregor that day, but he was pretty darn good. As I recall, he also lost the first game of the World Series. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think the Orioles reeled off 4 wins in a row to take the series, with McGregor winning that last game. So, but again, he was there when it counted, and that was the last World Series game that they won. So that's not shabby.
I told him that you went to that game that he pitched in and lost, and he laughed about it. So, and then he signed your picture for you.
It's up on my wall in my office.
Great,
Yep.
great pick. I have a DH and a pitcher left.
Okay.
There's a lot of great pitchers. There's not a lot of great DHs. There's a lot of different options for this one. I wanted to pick Nelson Cruz because he was so great, but it was just 1 year. I'm going to go with the St. Michael's guy. I'm going Harold Baines.
Yeah.
Hall of Famer for some reason, even though his numbers weren't great, elected on the Veterans Committee. But the pride is St. Michael's, Maryland, on Maryland's Eastern Shore. You got to take Harold Baines. I think he had like 300-something career homers, 20-ish a year. He was a long time with the White Sox, but came back to the Orioles for a pretty good run, I think.
He was a hitting machine, and his longevity obviously is what won him election to the Hall of Fame. But again, high character guy. He was always doing things in the community. And people still bump into him from time to time around St. Michael's. You'll probably bump into him sometime if you're down there. It does happen. But yeah, he was a great addition to the team again during that 96-97 playoff run, that the limited playoff run that they had, and he was a big part of those teams. And he could just flat out hit. He could hit it out of the park. He could hit doubles, and he could hit for average. So that's a great pick.
All right, you
Great.
got one. We both have a pitcher left. Who's your last starting pitcher?
I don't think it's any question, but it's going to have to be Mike Flanagan. That great year in 1979 when he wins 23 games. He wins the Cy Young Award that year. He pitches in the World Series in 79 and 83. And he comes back to the Orioles. He reinvents himself as a reliever, and he comes back and he pitches in relief for the O's. As well as the Blue Jays. But the guy could just do anything. Left-handed pitcher, hard thrower at the beginning of his career, and he had to learn to be crafty toward the end. But great, awesome pitcher, and again from that era, '79 through the mid '80s. For your money, if you needed to win a game, you wanted Mike Flanagan out there. If you wanted to shut the guy down in the late innings. Later on in the '80s and '90s, it was still Mike Flanagan.
That's a good one. So that there's really only one pick left that I think that makes sense. I'm gonna go Mike Cuellar. He was a
Yeah,
Cy Young Award winner with the Orioles. They traded for him from Houston, I believe. And he just went on to have a great run in the early '70s when the Orioles were winning 100 games and going to the World Series every year. It felt like so. Cuellar has to be the guy.
sure. Yeah, he was awesome, and again, he was part of that group of pitchers that just made the Orioles dominant. I mean, they didn't need great hitting. They had some great hitting, but they didn't need great hitting because they had great pitching. And they really started that formula. It was one that the Oakland A's would later discover, in the '70s and '80s that you could get rid of some of these high dollar hitters and just put some guys out there that could just kind of serve the ball up and around because your pitching staff was going to shut the other guy down. And you're going to win a lot of 4-3 and 3-2 games. So the Orioles really kind of set the pattern with that. But Cuellar he was awesome up until about the I think '73, '74 he was about done at that point. But yeah, '60s and early '70s, he was as good as there was out there.
Absolutely. So now it's interesting. So now is the point where this is going to be for the graphic. We're going to put these guys in a batting order. I'll let you
Sure.
go first. You can kind of talk it out. Who do you want hitting leadoff? I mean, you got a lot of options.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Bumbry has got to be the guy because that's where he batted, for the most part. He was their leadoff guy, good contact hitter. He would take the walks. He would typically hit for average, not for power, but he would set the table. So for me, I think it's got to be Bumbry in the leadoff spot.
All right. Who's in the two hole? That's sorry.
I'll go with Miguel Tejada again, another good contact guy. He could hit with some power, but he was really good with the bat, and that's what you want. I mean, you want your number one and number two guys up there setting the table. So I like the idea of him hitting second,
All right. The three is your best all around hitter usually. Uh,
and that's got to be Frank Robinson, right? I mean, who else?
Home run power, high average. Cleanup. You want somebody to drive in these runs. You got to have a big power bat there.
Yeah, and again, I think that's Lee May again in his prime in the early to mid '70s. He was that guy for the Orioles. When they got rid of Robinson, sadly they traded Robinson. Lee May stepped up and he assumed that role as best he could because nobody could really fill Frank Robinson's shoes.
That's a good point. Five. Who's your number five?
Number five hitter, I think I'm going with Palmeiro. I briefly debated having him hit fourth and May hit fifth, but I think it's six in one hand, half dozen in the other. I think Palmeiro could hit in either spot and do a very respectable job.
Absolutely. So your sixth guy.
Sixth guy, I think I'm going with Lowenstein. Clutch hitter, good contact guy. Probably doesn't merit being in the two hole, but somewhere middle-ish of the lineup is where I want him. So I would go six with Lowenstein.
All right. Who's next?
I think the Sensei at third base would be seventh.
All right.
I think he's good there. I think eighth. I think I want Davy Johnson.
The
And I
nine
think
is the 9 is interesting because I like to think of that as a second leadoff hitter.
Yeah, but again, that was a more recent development. I mean, typically in my era, the golden era, as I would call it, the nine guy really was maybe not one of your better hitters, and you just kind of put him there. I hate to do that to Dempsey, but because I don't think he was that bad of a hitter. But when you've got an all-star team of Orioles, you got to put somebody somewhere. So I'd slot him in there. But yeah, the second leadoff guy, that's a little bit more of a recent development, kind of like batting your pitcher eighth.
Yep.
What's that all about? So
That was a
that's my I was
I
gonna
was
say
gonna say that
that's my top nine right there. Plus Palmer is starting, and then I've got Randy Myers in the bullpen.
yeah, I figured the starting pitchers like would be in order. Also, wasn't Tony La Russa the guy that would always bat his pitcher eighth? Was he? I think he was the one that popularized it. I think.
I I think you're right. I remember him doing some things like that. He really he did some interesting things that kind of made you scratch your head, because to this day I don't understand that. But I mean, why you'd want your pitcher to have an additional opportunity to bat, even if it's just a percentage chance. I don't know why. Of course, now we're going to all DH, so
Yeah.
it's not a thing anymore anyway. It's like having your bullpen start the game. I still haven't figured that
Oh,
out. Why
yeah,
that
that's a
weird thing.
Tampa special.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna run through mine. I mean,
Okay.
lead off, it has to be Brian Roberts. I mean, he
Sure.
was he was your guy. The second is kind of interesting. There's a lot of options. I kind of want to have. I want to put Nick Markakis in the 2 hole. I
Yeah.
think I think Markakis, high on base guy, still hits 25-ish homers a year. Your best all around hitter has to be Cal. Cal has to be third.
Sure.
I think they moved him around the lineup a lot when he was playing. Um, so and then cleanup. I got to have a big power bat. I'm going Eddie Murray.
And that's where he would hit. The fourth spot was Eddie Murray all day long.
Fifth spot. I'm gonna go Harold Baines. Little power still going on there. Put my DH fifth. I'm gonna put AJ sixth because I still want him to get a little. Want him to get some at bats.
You could put him in at second. You could put him in to hit second too. I think he was starting to hit second a little bit more.
Yeah, they did. Well, yeah, they did put him up in second a lot. Seventh, I could go. I guess Brooks. I mean, Brooks had a decent bat. I think his max was like 25 homers. It's a little bit
If
of a
I'm not
high.
mistaken, I think he was a three hit. I think he was the three hitter, and I think Frank was fourth. I'm trying to remember, but I think so.
And then the last two, I'll stick. That kind of goes against my second leadoff strategy. I just was hyping that up. I'll put Wieters eighth, and I'll put Surhoff ninth. Just because
Yeah.
when I think of BJ Surhoff, I think of 2005, when he hit like 230. So that's my lineup, and of course I have Messina coming out first, Cuellar, or Messina, McNally, Cuellar, and Zach Britton shutting the door at the end.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun. Did this kind of like, what did this exercise kind of like, did it jog up some memories of the Orioles? Like, what could you take away from doing this?
Well, I think what it does, it brings back memories, which is awesome, because it's stuff I haven't thought about for a while. The other thing is that it makes you appreciate how good some of these players were, and how good some of these teams were. And the seasons seem to go by so quickly, and you don't really have a chance to kind of savor last season, and you're already thinking ahead to next season, because if they didn't win the World Series, it's disappointing. It's like, well, we'll get them next year. But what this does really is it forces you to look at these players and go, wow, they had a lot of talent that went out on that field. And so this is a lot of fun, a lot of good memories.
Absolutely. And, kind of like I had a lot of guys from my era. You obviously had a lot of guys from your era. And, it would have been one thing if we just would have picked like the first and second best in terms of career WAR at each position. But, there's guys like BJ Surhoff and Matt Wieters. There's guys that aren't the best career. Like they don't have like the all-time stats, but I mean, I would still take Matt Wieters over any Orioles catcher.
Right, and I take a John Lowenstein out in left field any day of the week because you're gonna get production out of him, and it's not gonna be all-star quality, but when you've got a good pitching staff, you don't need all-star quality. You just need a guy that if he's 0 for 3 and he comes up with a guy on second base and you're down by a run or two, that he can get him in, get him over, get him in, or maybe even just hit it over the wall. Earl Weaver's, favorite weapon was the 3-run home run. He liked guys that could hit the ball over the fence. And so that was Lowenstein. And again, he just always seemed to be there at a key moment and to get a key hit. And that's, it's a hallmark of a really good baseball club. And, the Yankees of the late 90s, Jeter. I mean, Jeter's the best example I can think of, he's 0 for 3. There's a guy on second base, the Yankees are down by 1. He's going to get him in. He's going to get the hit. You knew every single time he was going to get the hit, and because he's clutch. And so that's what I looked at. I looked at guys that I remembered being very, very clutch. And maybe their stats weren't, the war stats weren't what they needed to be. I just remember what they did and how they played and how much heart that they had. So this is a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed this. Thank you for inviting me to do
Absolutely.
this.
Thank you. And remember to be sure to vote on these. We're going to put the graphic up of Justin and Dad's team here. So, yeah, a lot of fun.